Good evening, lovers of history and the world's strange turning points. Tonight, we're in Roman Britain, an occupation that Rome insists is a province, and the locals still feel is a wound with paperwork on it. It's around AD 60. The air smells of wood smoke, wet wool, and iron. On a newly laid road, you can hear the steady tap of hobnails and the creak of carts dragged toward markets that didn't exist a generation ago. This isn't a hero's biography. This is a system under strain. Rome brings roads, forts, coins, courts, and a beautiful idea, order. But order has a price tag. Taxes must be collected. Land must be surveyed. Disputes must be judged, usually in a language that isn't yours. And when an empire writes rules, it also writes who gets to be humiliated by them. Along the new roads, milestones carry the emperor's name the way modern billboards carry brands: constant, confident, unavoidable. In the forts, winter damp seeps into straw mattresses, and soldiers grumble about British rain as if weather is a political enemy. In villages, Roman coins start to replace barter, and with coins comes debt, interest, and the terrifying idea that a bad season can now be punished by law instead of luck. In a timber hall in the east, a local noble runs a thumb over a seal impression on wax. He wants stability, he has children to feed and rivals to outmaneuver. Yet he feels the quiet shame of asking permission to be himself. Across the province, a Roman administrator, trained to fear disorder, tells himself Britain is a test: keep the numbers clean, keep the peace, keep the emperor pleased. That's the hook. A province can look calm while it's storing rage like dry straw. And in Roman Britain, the spark won't come from a battlefield trumpet. It will come from inheritance law, debt, and a single decision that turns daily life into history: one document opened, one insult delivered, and suddenly, the island learns how fast the world can burn. At dawn in Londinium, the Thames is a grey ribbon, and the docks smell of fish, tar, and imported wine. Traders shout over one another. A clerk counts amphorae with a stylus and a frown, because the empire counts everything. A soldier watches the river, half bored, half alert. He tells himself this posting is safe compared to Germania. But safety on a frontier is always temporary. Zoom out, Rome is building a machine. Roads straighten distance. Forts pin down crossings. A governor's office turns violence into administration: permits, fines, tax schedules, legal summons. The technology isn't only swords, it's bureaucracy. Britain is divided, categorized, and made legible to Rome. Now zoom in again: Camulodunum, a veteran colony planted like a flag. Midday sun hits pale stone. Retired legionaries stroll a forum that feels imported, almost staged. Many simply want land and quiet. Others carry a private hunger: respect. One veteran farmer stares at a boundary marker and thinks, I earned this. If locals complain, they're ungrateful. Under that thought is fear that retirement will be judged, that the empire will forget him. A temple to the deified Claudius rises over the settlement, paid for in ways that sting the surrounding tribes. The stonework is bright against the low British sky. Inside, incense fights the smell of damp clothes. A local craftsman hired to carve details feels a private conflict. The wages feed his family, but each chisel strike helps build a symbol that tells his neighbors they've been replaced. It's religion, yes, but also propaganda. Rome is eternal, resistance is pointless. And yet propaganda has a weakness. It demands the audience pretend to believe. When people stop pretending, the whole performance collapses. For now, the colony keeps expanding, the tax lists keep growing, and the island's quiet resentment begins to find a rhythm. Rome's officials call it integration. The locals call it swallowing. And when swallowing becomes impossible, the body does something else. In the Iceni lands, the morning feels older than Rome. Frost sits on heather. Smoke from roundhouses clings low, smelling of peat and salted meat. A woman checks a small pouch of locally minted coins, proud little discs that say, quietly, we belong to ourselves. Children run between cattle. Life here is not a province. It's kinship, obligation, and reputation. The Iceni have a client king recognized by Rome, Prasutagus. It's a Roman strategy as old as conquest: rule through local elites, save legions, collect revenue. Prasutagus lives with a difficult calculation. He wants peace. He also wants dignity. His inner conflict is simple and brutal: accept Rome's terms and survive, or resist and risk annihilation. So he negotiates, hosts officials, pays what he must, and tries to keep his people's autonomy intact. Next to him is Boudica, queen in a society where elite women can hold property and influence alliances. Think of her less as a lone heroine and more as a public nerve. She carries the tribe's honor in her posture, and honor is political currency. A single insult to that honor can mobilize thousands faster than any tax notice. Rome absorbs. And absorption is never painless. In summer, Roman merchants arrive with scales and contracts; in winter, debt collectors arrive with witnesses. A local metalworker who once made ceremonial torques now makes simpler pieces for Roman buyers, and he feels the cultural shift in his own hands: less sacred display, more standardized commodity. At the edges of the Iceni territory, Roman forts sit like clenched fists. You can hear the rhythmic slap of a practice drill, the barked Latin commands, the clink of mail as men turn in unison. Client rule is meant to smooth conquest, but it also concentrates pressure. When Rome recognizes a king, it expects results: tax, loyalty, quiet. When the king can't guarantee those things, Rome looks for a replacement mechanism: direct rule. Prasutagus senses this, which is why his household becomes a place of constant calculation: who to marry, whom to reward, whom to trust. In private, he worries that every Roman gift is a leash, but he accepts them because refusing looks like defiance. Meanwhile, in the provincial financial office, a procurator runs numbers. He fears shortfalls. He fears accusations of softness. He tells himself law is neutral, that annexation is routine. But routine, on the ground, feels like theft. Rome's legal gravity pulls client kingdoms into direct rule the moment a contract ends. And contracts end when people die. That's the tension. The future of an entire people is balanced on the private problem of succession: who inherits, who controls land, who owes whom. Prasutagus is aging. Rome is watching. And the Iceni are about to learn what client really means when the client can no longer speak. The officials arrive with clean tablets and hard faces. Rain taps the thatch. Boots track mud across a household that is still mourning. You can smell damp wool and hearth smoke as names are read aloud: estates, livestock, rights. This is what conquest looks like after the swords: inventory. Prasutagus dies around this moment, and in his will he tries a compromise. Ancient sources tell us he named the Emperor Nero as co-heir alongside his own daughters, hoping the gesture would protect his family and keep the Iceni semi-independent. It's a clever move, and also a desperate one. Because Rome doesn't share power the way local kings do. Rome absorbs. Quintus Decianus, the procurator, is the man with the stamp. He is not a general. He is a financial officer, and that makes him dangerous in a different way. His inner conflict is career versus caution. If he hesitates, he risks being blamed for lost revenue. If he presses too hard, he risks revolt. He chooses pressure, because pressure produces numbers that look good in Rome. Veterans in Camulodunum sense permission. A retired centurion, drunk on entitlement, believes domination is his pension. Local nobles are summoned and treated as subjects. Old agreements are reinterpreted. Loans are called in. Property is seized. It's not just money, it's status. A British notable who once dined with Roman officers feels the floor shift beneath him. He wants to protect his household, but he also fears the shame of submission more than hunger. In the background, the legal language is doing its own violence. Under Roman law, daughters can inherit, but Rome can also treat a client king's realm as property of the state once direct rule is declared. A junior scribe, ink-stained and nervous, feels a tug of guilt when he watches local elders struggle with the Latin phrasing. He wants to believe procedure is fairness, yet he can see procedure being used as a weapon. When humiliation is made public, it becomes contagious. People who might have tolerated taxes do not tolerate dishonor. The will, intended as a shield, becomes a trigger. And as the legal machinery tightens, the province's peace begins to sound less like quiet, and more like breath held before a scream. Now we reach the moment Roman writers could not ignore, even as they tried to control the story. In an Iceni courtyard, the air is sharp with rain and horse sweat. A wooden post stands ready. Leather straps creak as they're pulled tight. Onlookers don't shout, they listen, because listening is part of fear. Tacitus reports that Boudica was publicly flogged and that her daughters were assaulted by Roman soldiers. Every detail comes to us through Roman pens, and we should treat ancient reporting with care. But the pattern is consistent with how occupations enforce dominance, public humiliation, sexual violence, and the message that local status no longer counts. A centurion supervising the punishment tells himself it is discipline. Underneath, he fears appearing weak to his men, and weakness in a garrison can spread like disease. This is where systems miscalculate. Rome believes shock will produce obedience. But shock can produce unity. An Iceni aristocrat who has cooperated with Rome feels nausea, not only at the cruelty, but at his own past compromises. His inner conflict collapses into a single thought: if we accept this, there is no bottom. Messages travel fast without paper. Market gossip becomes planning. Sacred groves become meeting points. The Trinovantes, long resentful of the veteran colony and the Claudius temple, listen and nod. Anger becomes logistics: where to gather, how to feed fighters, which roads to cut, which forts to avoid. You can almost watch the psychology change: faces harden, voices lower, laughter disappears. A local priest at a river shrine wonders whether the gods are angry, or whether the gods are simply waiting for humans to act. His conflict is faith versus survival: speak against Rome and die, or bless rebellion and risk dragging his community into slaughter. And here's the timing: Governor Suetonius Paulinus is away in the west campaigning on Mona, targeting Druidic centers Rome sees as resistance hubs. The garrisons in the east feel secure, until they don't. Britain's rebellion is forming like weather, invisible until it's already moving. And by the time Rome notices the change in the wind, the first fire is already being carried toward Camulodunum. Camulodunum is supposed to be untouchable. Stone buildings. A forum. A temple that declares Claudius a god. It's a stage set for Roman permanence. But permanence is a claim, not a fact. One morning, the city hears a different sound: a swelling roar of bodies, the crackle of torches, the frantic barking of dogs that know something their owners refuse to admit. Smoke arrives first, tasting of thatch and pine resin. Veterans grab old helmets and rusting swords. A retired legionary who once fought in Gaul feels his chest tighten with a private panic: I didn't survive war to die in my own reward. He hates that fear, because Romans are trained to treat fear as shame. The rebels, Iceni and allies, especially the Trinovantes, strike the colony and everything it represents. You can feel the siege in small details: arrows thudding into timber, the sting of sparks on skin, the way shouting turns hoarse and then desperate. A Roman woman married to a veteran stuffs valuables into a cloth and realizes the cloth is too small. She must choose what part of her life is worth carrying. Archaeology supports the broad outline: a destruction layer, burned structures, signs of sudden catastrophe. People flee into the Claudius temple, believing stone means safety. Inside, the air turns hot and oily. You can hear prayers, coughing, the scrape of sandals on marble. The building becomes a trap, not a refuge. Calls for help go out. A small relief force is cut down. Tacitus describes part of the 9th Legion's infantry being destroyed when it attempts to intervene, with survivors scattered. The procurator Decianus, the man of money, chooses self-preservation. His inner conflict is naked: stay and be judged brave, or flee and live. He flees, later a symbol of administrative failure. Camulodunum burns, and with it burns the illusion that Rome's presence is stable. The road network that was meant to control Britain now becomes a guide for rebellion. Because the next targets are obvious, the places where money moves, where officials sit, where Rome's confidence has grown comfortable. And the rebels are already marching toward the Thames. When Suetonius hears the news, it lands like a stone in the stomach. His campaign on Mona has been about breaking spiritual resistance, druids, sacred sites, the psychological spine of local identity. Now the spine of Roman control in the east is snapping. In his tent, maps are suddenly insults. He feels a soldier's fear of being outpaced, not by courage but by distance. He marches hard toward Londinium. This settlement is young but vital, a trading hub with warehouses, timber streets, and docks that connect Britain to the wider empire. As Suetonius approaches, the air fills with panic. Carts creak under overloaded goods. Oxen bellow. Shopkeepers argue over what can be carried and what must be abandoned. A trader clutches a bag of coins and realizes his hands are shaking. He wants to believe Rome will protect him. He also knows protection is a resource, and resources are rationed. Suetonius makes the decision that defines commanders on the frontier. He cannot defend Londinium with the troops he has. If he stays, he risks losing his legions in a city fight and handing Britain to the rebels. His inner conflict is arithmetic with human lives: sacrifice a town to save a province, or save a town and lose everything. He chooses withdrawal. It is a classic frontier choice: save the mobile force, lose the fixed point. A young officer, watching civilians beg to be allowed into the marching column, feels a stab of shame. His training tells him to obey the governor, his conscience tells him the empire is abandoning its own. He hardens his face, because softness, in an army, can become mutiny. The rebels arrive with momentum and fury. Londinium burns. Then Verulamium, another Roman-aligned settlement, follows. Tacitus emphasizes the scale of killing, Romans and allies alike, because rebellion here is not negotiation. It is annihilation of the symbols of occupation. The Thames carries ash downstream. Refugees clog the roads. And Suetonius, retreating with intent, is now searching for a place where Roman discipline can turn rebel numbers into a disadvantage. The province is on fire, but the governor is trying to choose the shape of the final battle. Somewhere ahead, terrain is waiting to do what speeches cannot. By the time the third town burns, the pattern is unmistakable. This isn't random violence. It's strategic terror directed at Roman infrastructure, colonies, markets, administrative centers. In Verulamium, painted walls blister and collapse. You can smell heated plaster, charred grain, and the bitter smoke of stored goods, Rome's prosperity turning into a black cloud. Rebel success grows the coalition. It also complicates it. A movement that begins as revenge becomes a political project: who leads, who gets spoils, who decides targets. A warband chief feels a creeping worry. He wants victory, but he fears rivalry inside the camp more than Roman steel. Unity, in a coalition, is always rented. It must be paid for with constant momentum. Meanwhile, Rome's machine shudders. Small garrisons retreat into forts and watch the countryside go hostile. Supply routes fracture. Messengers risk ambush. The procurator Decianus, already fleeing, leaves a vacuum in financial authority. In Rome, the shock is not only military, it is reputational. Britain was supposed to be manageable. Manageable provinces do not erase Roman towns in weeks. Ancient sources give large casualty figures, tens of thousands dead across the burned settlements. We should treat the exact numbers cautiously, but the broader reality is grim, mass killing, not only of Romans, but of provincial allies and anyone trapped inside Roman spaces. A British man who once sold cattle to a Roman buyer feels a quiet terror. If the rebels win, his old business partners become evidence against him. If Rome wins, his neighbors may betray him. He is trapped between two futures. Suetonius gathers what he can, the 14th legion, elements of the 20th, auxiliaries, cavalry. He cannot chase the rebels everywhere. He must force them to fight on ground that favors Roman method. And now, after 3 burnings, the rebels want the showdown too, because victory feels close, and closeness can be intoxicating. The next step is inevitable. One side needs a decisive battle to restore control. The other needs it to finish the job. And Britain's roads, built for empire, are guiding both toward the same narrow point. In a Roman marching camp, night is practical. Fires are small. Shields are stacked. Iron is checked, straps tightened, javelins bundled. The smell is sweat, smoke, and vinegar water. Somewhere a soldier coughs and tries to hide it. Sickness, on campaign, can be deadlier than the enemy. Suetonius chooses terrain the way a skilled engineer chooses a bridge site. Ancient tradition links the decisive battle to Watling Street, though the exact location is debated. What matters is the shape, a narrow defile with woods or rising ground protecting the flanks, open space only in front. A funnel. A place where Roman discipline can meet a larger force without being surrounded. Discipline is Rome's hidden technology. Legionaries are standardized, armor, shields, drills, command structure. The pila are designed to bend on impact, turning enemy shields into dead weight. A young legionary runs a thumb along the rim of his helmet and feels the private fear he won't confess. He wants honor. He also wants to go home. Those two desires don't always cooperate. Across the landscape, the rebel host gathers like a moving society. Logistics become destiny. Rebels need food, fodder, and cohesion. Romans need secure supply lines and time. A Roman quartermaster counts sacks of grain and feels a practical fear. If the wagons are ambushed, the legion starves, and starvation breaks discipline faster than any spear. Across the landscape, the rebel host gathers like a moving society. Families follow. Wagons carry supplies. Some sources describe a ring of wagons behind the army, a kind of viewing stand for a victory they assume is coming. Confidence can be useful, until it becomes a trap. Boudica's role, in the Roman accounts, becomes symbolic, the outraged queen, the banner of unity. But symbols must still feed armies. They must still keep rivals aligned. A rebel leader watches the campfire lines and worries. If we hesitate, the coalition fractures. If we rush, we might run into something prepared. That's the knife edge. Rome is betting on method and terrain. The rebels are betting on numbers and fury. In the morning, when the mist lifts, those bets will be collected, by the same road that brought Rome into Britain in the first place. Morning is cold enough to make metal bite. Do beads on shields. The woods ahead are still, as if they're holding their breath. The Romans stand tight, an unglamorous wall of oval shields, short swords, and practiced spacing. This is not dramatic. It's controlled. That control is the point. Behind the rebel line, wagons sit like a promise. You can smell animal dung and fresh-cut timber. The presence of families tells you something important. This is not a raid. It's an attempt to decide the province's future in one day. A farmer-turned-fighter grips a spear and feels his inner conflict sharpen into dread. If we lose, my household becomes property. That dread pushes him forward more than ideology. Suetonius rides the line. He doesn't need a long speech. He needs his men to trust the drill. His private fear is political as much as personal. If he loses, the emperor's court will not call it unfortunate. It will call it failure. And failure, in Rome, is often punished more harshly than cruelty. Somewhere near the front, a standard-bearer adjusts his grip until his fingers stop shaking. He wants to be the image of Rome, steady, inevitable, because if the image fails, morale follows. The rebels advance with noise and movement that fills the valley, war cries, shields clattering, feet pounding damp ground. For a moment, numbers look like destiny. But the terrain compresses them. The front ranks cannot spread. They cannot flank. They must push forward into a prepared wall. Then the Roman signal comes. The pila rise in a dark line against the pale sky and arc forward with a heavy, deliberate grace. It's a simple action, throwing javelins, but it carries the full weight of Roman military design. In the next seconds, shields will become burdens, formations will buckle, and the battle will stop being a heroic clash and become something colder, a test of systems. And once that test begins, it doesn't pause for courage. It only asks one question: whose method breaks first? The pila hit with a brutal logic. Iron punches into wood. Weight drags shields down. Some javelins bend, designed to make the shield useless, forcing men to drop their protection or carry it like a dead animal. In a packed crowd, one stumble becomes 10. The rebel surge slows, not from lack of bravery but from physics. Now Roman discipline takes over. Legionaries step forward in tight order, stabbing from behind shields, advancing like a machine. You hear the short grunt of effort, the scrape of sandals in mud, the wet shock of bodies falling. A Roman soldier feels nausea rise. This is close work, intimate and exhausting. He tells himself that efficiency is mercy. He also senses, with quiet horror, that he is becoming efficient. On the flanks, Roman cavalry and auxiliaries exploit the funnel. The rebels try to pull back, but the wagons behind them, confidence-turned architecture, block retreat. Panic spreads. The battlefield becomes a crush, and the crush becomes slaughter. When the line breaks, the sound changes. The organized roar becomes scattered screams, hoofbeats, and the brittle snap of cart wheels under pressure. Dust sticks to sweat. Blood darkens the mud until it looks like new soil. Tacitus describes a catastrophic defeat, with huge casualties among the rebels. As with all ancient numbers, caution is wise, but the outcome is clear: the rebel coalition breaks. A war leader who had imagined victory now feels a different thought, sharp as a blade: we built our own cage. Boudica's end is reported differently by sources. Tacitus suggests she took poison, other traditions hint at illness or disappearance. The uncertainty is fitting. Revolts do not always end in a clean cinematic scene. They end in exhaustion, dispersal, and quiet choices made off-stage. For Rome, the battle restores control. For Britain, it leaves a scar that cannot be paved over with roads. The question now is what Rome does with a province it nearly lost, because empires, after a scare, often become harsher before they become smarter. And Britain is about to feel that reflex. After the decisive battle, the fighting doesn't end so much as change shape. Roman columns move through the countryside with a hard purpose: punish, disarm, starve out remaining resistance. In a burned farmstead, the smell is damp ash and spoiled grain. A cooking pot lies cracked beside a doorway that opens to nothing. Crows hop close, fearless. Suetonius believes terror is insurance. His inner conflict is strategic: if he shows mercy, he risks another uprising; if he shows only cruelty, he risks turning the whole province into permanent hostility. On a frontier, commanders often choose the option that feels controllable in the short term. That option is usually force. The result is famine and fear. Fields go unharvested. Livestock is seized. Villages that sheltered rebels are targeted. A local father watches Roman troops drive off cattle and feels a humiliation that burns hotter than hunger. He wants revenge, but he wants his children alive through winter. So he swallows rage and tastes shame. Back in Rome, the revolt is a political embarrassment. Ancient accounts suggest Nero even considered abandoning Britain. That idea alone tells you how expensive and uncertain conquest can be. But abandoning a province looks like weakness, and imperial politics runs on appearances. Nero's inner conflict is vanity versus cost: keep Britain and spend blood and money, or withdraw and admit limits. An imperial freedman, Polyclitus, is sent to investigate, an audit with sandals. Picture his arrival at a muddy fort, polished entourage, expensive cloak, officers smiling too tightly. Suetonius must justify his choices not only to soldiers, but to bureaucrats. And bureaucracy has its own violence: recall, disgrace, replacement. This is the quieter turning point. Rome is deciding what kind of rule will follow the fire: rule by intimidation, or rule by managed compromise. The empire survives, yes. But survival comes with lessons, and lessons come with new policies. In the next chapter, we watch Rome attempt something it rarely admits it needs: adjustment. Rebuilding begins where the ashes are still warm. In Londinium, hammers knock against new timber. The smell is fresh sap mixed with old smoke. A mason spreads mortar with practiced care, trying to make straight lines over ground that remembers heat. Children pick through rubble for anything useful: bent brooches, glass beads, coins stamped with a face that once claimed divinity. Rome responds the way it often does after a frontier crisis: it changes personnel and softens the edges, not from kindness, but from calculation. Suetonius is recalled. A more conciliatory governor, Petronius Turpilianus, takes over, aiming to stabilize the province without provoking another mass uprising. His inner conflict is ambition versus risk. Calm Britain looks like competence. Another firestorm looks like career death. So policy shifts. The military remains, but the tone changes. Some confiscations are moderated. Local elites are courted again with titles and trade opportunities. The empire learns that humiliation is expensive. You can tax a people who feel trapped. You cannot easily tax a people who feel they have nothing left to lose. Trade resumes cautiously. A merchant in Gaul studies an account tablet and debates whether Britain is worth investing in. He wants profit, but he fears unpredictability, the kind that turns warehouses into bonfires. In small ways, Rome begins to buy stability, not with grand speeches, but with predictable courts, controlled veteran behavior, and the promise, never fully kept, that cooperation will be rewarded. The revolt becomes a file in Rome's memory and a wound in Britain's. Tacitus writes it as warning and drama, highlighting both Roman discipline and Roman arrogance. The province's new normal includes roads, towns, and a constant awareness that the ground beneath them once rose up. And as the smoke fades, a deeper question appears: when resistance fails, does it disappear, or does it change form, becoming story, symbol, and quiet identity that waits for another chance? A generation later, Roman Britain feels smoother on the surface. Bathhouses steam in small towns. You hear water slap against tile, smell perfumed oil, and listen to easy gossip in mixed accents, Latin layered over local speech. Nails are standardized. Pottery comes from workshops that stamp their names like brands. The province is becoming legible not only to Rome, but to itself. For many locals, Romanization is not surrender, it's negotiation with reality. Wear Roman dress, and officials take you seriously. Use Latin in contracts, and disputes go your way. Send a son into auxiliary service, and he returns with pay, a scar, and habits learned far from home. A local leader watches his household adopt Roman dining customs and feels a complicated pride. He wants his family to rise. He also fears that rising means forgetting. Rome's memory of the revolt becomes a controlled story: dangerous barbarians, a fierce queen, order restored. It's useful propaganda. It warns other provinces: rebellion ends badly. But propaganda also reveals anxiety. Empires don't write cautionary tales about enemies they truly consider harmless. Britain's memory is quieter. Stories travel in kitchens, not on monuments. Elders speak of the year the towns burned and the legions almost broke. The details blur, but the feeling remains: Rome can bleed. A shepherd on a hill sees a distant fort silhouette and feels both fear and a stubborn kind of dignity. He tells himself, they are not gods. They are men. Centuries later, long after Rome withdraws, that feeling will be repurposed. Boudica becomes a symbol different ages can borrow: nationhood, resistance, righteous fury. The Victorian statue near the Thames turns her into bronze certainty. But bronze is simple, and history is not. The real legacy is more unsettling, a demonstration of how fast administration can become oppression, and oppression can become fire. The question that lingers is not, who was Boudica, but what kind of system creates a Boudica moment? And to answer that, we need one last quiet scene, where empire feels ordinary again, until it doesn't. Late at night, in a room above a rebuilt street, a small lamp trembles in a draught. The smell is tallow, damp wool, and ink. A minor official copies figures, tax assessments, grain tallies, names that will become obligations. Empire lives in these rooms as much as it lives on battlefields. He is not a villain. He is tired. His inner conflict is ordinary: he wants predictability because predictability keeps his family safe and his pay regular. Yet he remembers the stories older soldiers tell about AD 60 or 61, the year of burning towns, the year the province almost slipped away. He tells himself that better administration will prevent another revolt. But he also knows, privately, that administration can be the spark when it forgets dignity. Outside, a local woman carries firewood past a fort. The stones are quiet now. The soldiers are routine. But the ground holds memory. She has heard of a queen punished in public, of towns consumed, of a final battle where the road narrowed and the crowd became trapped. She doesn't know the Latin names. She knows the feeling: humiliation turning into unity, unity turning into momentum, momentum turning into catastrophe. If you've ever watched a modern bureaucracy mishandle a crisis, PR spin first, accountability later, you already understand the instinct at work here. Rome writes reports, replaces officials, tightens rules, then insists the problem was solved. A provincial commander who survived the revolt feels an inner tremor. He wants to believe the new measures will prevent another uprising, but he also knows measures can become provocations. That's the Discovery Channel truth of it. This story is not a single person's arc. It's an ecosystem of pressure, veteran entitlement, debt collection, legal absorption of land, propaganda temples, and a governor forced to choose between a city and an army. Boudica appears like a flare that lights the entire landscape for one violent season. And when the flare fades, the system continues, adjusted, not redeemed. Roads get repaired. Towns rebuild. Paperwork resumes. But every empire carries its weak points inside its routines. Somewhere, in some other province, another document will be opened, another insult delivered, and the next quiet turning point will begin to inhale.